This is part two of Who Owns the Past for Rise of Civilization. So, where we left off was with NAGPRA, the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act. So, this created all kinds of problems for anthropologists. What you're seeing here is a picture of the osteology lab at the University of Kentucky, Knoxville, where the body farm is. All these places were supposed to return their collections if they came from Native Americans. Was this fair? Well, most people think it was. Here is a picture from Kodiak of human remains being repatriated. What they did was they just had a mass burial, and you can see the Russian Orthodox priest presiding over the remains. This is a picture of Otto Geist. Otto Geist, back in the 1930s, was a prominent archaeologist. He actually went to St. Lawrence Island, went out there. First thing he did was go to the graveyard without the permission of the inhabitants of St. Lawrence Island. Just started digging up bodies and took 386, and he brought them to UAF's museum. I'm doing my dissertation on the Aleutian mummies. Here is a picture of some of the mummies being taken out. The mummies were actually placed in caves. We'll talk more about them when we talk about North America. And the local people used to visit them because they were their relatives, and they believed that the mummies took on their own life after dark and engaged in the same activities that other people did during the day. And the head of the anthropology section of the Smithsonian in the 1940s, his name is Alex Hrdlicka, just went in, just started taking all the bodies he could find. And the interesting thing on that one is just now they're starting to be studied. Okay, but this wasn't the end of the story. So we could say, okay, NAGPRA was passed, Indian graves are saved, end of story. This is where we get into the whole Kennewick Man situation. One of your assignments was to find out who Kennewick Man was or is. There's a video for you to watch that I posted on Blackboard. But the big question is, what did Kennewick Man have to do with NAGPRA? Well, it opened up a whole Pandora's box. Why was that? Well, the most important thing with Kennewick Man was that he was about 9,000 years old. And as you know, he was found in Kennewick, Washington. How many 9,000-year-old skeletons are found? Not many. And what are we back to trying to piece together? We're still trying to figure out how North and South America were populated. So this was a really big deal. We might get some clues as to, okay, who were these people, the first people coming into the United States or North and South America? And as soon as the Native Americans caught wind of Kennewick Man, all of a sudden they said, oops, NAGPRA, dun, 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 can't touch it. And they wanted Kennewick Man just buried because they said he is an ancestor and you can't dig up Indian remains. End of story. So the question came up again, who owns the past? Do the Native Americans? Do modern people living in both North and South America? Here's a cartoon. It says, one for you, one for me, one for the Museum of Natural History. Now, where that comes from is that while all these bodies were being taken away for scientific studies, a lot of times people would say, okay, and I can testify to this because I'm doing it in my dissertation. And so Hrdlicka, who had graduate students with him when he was digging up human remains all over Alaska, he would say, okay, Bob, you were a good guy today. Here's a skull you can take. And, we don't need all of them. Just take it home. So the big question was, who owns the past? Did archaeologists have the right to study? Well, they did a facial reconstruction on Kennewick Man, and here's what they think he looked like. Guess what? He looks like Patrick Stewart or Captain Picard. And so the thing that came into play with NAGPRA was, of course, if he was Native American, then technically his bones could not be studied. But this brought up the whole argument of what is race? What is a Native American? When did people start forming tribes? Because we know 9,000 years ago there were no tribes. So, did the tribes have the right to say that he was an ancestor? So, it really created a big hoopla, and people were going back and forth into court fighting over this for a long time. If you look on the internet, there's all kinds of sites documenting the court cases. There are books that have been written, so you can find a lot of information out about Kennewick Man. But what Kennewick Man did was he drew attention to what is race to begin with. Okay, what is a Native American? So the racial identity of Kennewick Man was at the heart of the controversy. So this is why I had you look up how many races there are. Well, just so you know, according to the American Anthropological Association, and you might want to look at the links that I put on Blackboard for you, there is only one race, the human race. What they say is that A, there are no pure races left. Everybody's so mixed anyway. B, that the whole concept of race or the word race did not come into play until colonial times when European governments were dominating more traditional cultures. They were going into, they were colonizing, and so they had to make themselves seem better than their subordinates. So that's how we started getting race. That's how we started saying, well, some races are better than others. And so, what the anthropologists say, and again, you might want to look at that article, is that race is a social construct, not a biological one. Because when we determine people's race, usually we look at someone's skin color. Well, what is skin color? Skin color is an adaptation to the environment. If you met me, I am very fair skinned. I have blue eyes. My ancestry is German. I go out in the sun, I get blisters, probably get skin cancer, but it has to do with melatonin in my skin. It has nothing to do with my intelligence or anything else. So, what anthropologists are proposing is that we substitute the word race with the word ethnicity. And again, I put stuff on Blackboard for you to look at about that subject. So, if we start looking at what is the definition of a Native American, then what about an Alaska Native? Who's an Alaska Native? How much blood quantum do you need? According to NAGPRA, this is really interesting. The definition in NAGPRA is that a Native American is any tribe, people, or culture that resided in the territory of the United States before historic European contact and exploration. Okay, well, the contact is what, 1600s, 1400s, for Columbus. Okay, but if we go by Kennewick Man, he's much, much older. He's 9,000 years old. So, we have to start throwing some of these old archaic notions out. Now, is everybody going to buy this? No. But it's a start, and I think if you haven't noticed, a lot of places, job applications are starting a little bit to use the word ethnicity versus race, because is there any consensus about how many races there are? If you did your homework, I mean, that's all over the board too. So, the only other thing is that you might want to look up cultural resource laws in Alaska, because it is against the law to take artifacts, especially from state and public lands. So, you should look at the laws. Like I said, Google it. And I just threw in this that there is the American Anthropological Association, which is the triple A's, and then we have what's called the little triple A's, which is the Alaska Anthropological Association. If you ever feel like joining, there is an archaeological field school every summer. If you want more information about that, I can give it to you. Usually you get about 8 credits for being a slave on an archaeological dig.